Okay, welcome back to Bard with the Bone Online. I'm Sean Eustace. Welcome back to 2023 after getting through the winter. And we're going to start it off with just what is text work, because we keep on talking about it at Baltimore Shakespeare Factory, but then people go, well, what is it? So luckily, Abigail Funk, they, them, is ready to try to explain it better than I could. So that's my plan. And I'm just going to turn it over to you. And people, you can mute or unmute as questions are askable. And I'm going to just step out of the way.
Well, thank you very much, Sean. So yes, my name is Abigail. I'm the education director here for Baltimore Shakespeare Factory. I'm also a local teaching artist and an actor. So I do know what I'm talking about when I go into this presentation. I'm very excited to be here presenting for you today. And I know when we throw around the word, we throw out the ideas of text work and Iambic Fundamentalism and all those fun things. Those are things that can be very scary to people who don't know what they mean, or people who have less experience with such concepts. So hopefully we're going to demystify that this evening, and we'll have some hopefully really great discussions. My plan for this evening is going to be less lecture focused and more sort of round tables, seminar style discussions as we work together to figure out what text work is, how important it is, and what place it has in the rehearsal room and the process of understanding Shakespeare. So to get us started, my first conversation question for all of us, and feel free to answer either out loud or in chat, whatever you are comfortable with, is just what first drew you to Shakespeare? When were you first drawn to Shakespeare, and why? What was it about Shakespeare that really caught your attention? Miss Beth, go ahead.
Hi. Actually, it was probably Richard Burton and an argument I had with my mother about seeing a film he did on Hamlet, and how she didn't want me to see it because it was going to be a $5 ticket, and this was like in the 1964, and a $5 ticket would have been expensive in those days, and the fact that she didn't care for his personal life. But she gave in eventually and let me go see Hamlet. And fortunately, I had excellent teachers going through my childhood that interested me in everything. And the fact that I was technically 9 when I started studying the tutors. So, it's just a given that I'd do all of this.
Right. And if you don't mind expanding on it, when you did see Hamlet and when you did start studying, what was it about Shakespeare that kept your interest? Because some people, so many children, I see it a lot as our education director. So many children are so tied to the desk and the experience of just, two households both alike, indignity, and that'll put anybody to sleep. So what is it that brought you here?
I like the stories. It wasn't a matter of just what they were saying. It was the cinematography if I saw a film, or the set design if I saw a play, and how the people interacted with each other. It wasn't how they spoke, because I had lived in so many different places. I was so used to hearing different accents. It didn't matter. And that was something that was just absolutely delightful to me.
That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing. And Liana, Liana, I see in the chat that we've got, it was the language. It wasn't Shakespeare's actual language. It was comparing two different translations of him. Do you feel comfortable expanding on that for us?
Right, sure. So my first language is Russian. So I started learning about / text of Shakespeare well before I had the English for it. But I'm also a total sucker for not just text work, but translation, which is a really interesting take on text work, because to be a good translator, you need to understand the context and the in-jokes and how to adapt them to a totally different culture. So by the time I got to theater and text work, I already had to have under my belt the entire, not only Iambic Pentameter thing, although some of the more advanced notions I didn't really think about until I got to Barton and his stuff. But the how do you work with text approaches are quite similar between preparing for a theater thing and figuring out what the text means well enough to render it in a different language.
Yes, well, that is fascinating. I can say that that isn't something that I have very much experience with, but I would love to hear more of your thoughts as the conversation continues about what it was like, having the translations and how much that applies to the sort of text work that we ask the actors to do in the rehearsal room. That would be an interesting sort of comparison.
Sometimes when I work with the text, I will even now sneak a couple of translations and see what other people who speak both of the same languages that I do thought of a particular line and agree or disagree with them quite dramatically.
Well, that's wonderful to be able to have those conversations.
Okay.
Yes, Ms. Beth.
Yes, I was going to say the one thing about Shakespeare and the language and the translations is that it can translate into any language. The fact that Shakespeare all of his plays have been translated into Klingon tells you something about his ability to reach people, because, we often say, well, how would you do this because you don't use this form or that form? But Shakespeare is translatable and it appeals to everyone.
Yes, I
Sorry.
agree. I very much. No. I love that. I love the passion. That's why we're here, to talk about that and to see what brings our attention.
Yes, and behind me, the Latin does translate to Vini, Vidi, Edi, I came, I saw, I ate.
Oh, that's adorable.
It's a Christmas stocking I made for a grandbaby.
Very nice.
Not
Does
that
anyone
anybody-
else feel
no.
comfortable
I'm
sharing
gonna-
about?
I'm gonna go.
Yeah, go ahead. Go
Not that
ahead.
anybody needs to know about, it would have been 1976, 77, because it was the 75 Childcraft World Books, and it was the poems and rhymes, and it was just one small snippet, and it was the part where Bottom transforms in the middle of Midsummer Night's Dream. And like, this is put in the middle of all of those other things with, Beowulf and Grendel and, other stories, but like this one snippet where Bottom is transformed and all of the rude mechanicals are freaking out. I'm like, that's my first exposure. And like, then later on, I'm like, oh, this wasn't just some fairy story. This is somebody else writing a whole play around the rest of it. Where's the rest of it? So, that was ages ago.
Well, I feel like that would make a very strong impression. Anybody else comfortable sharing what first brought you to Shakespeare, what your first exposure was? And what started, like the Shakespeare bug that we all have?
I'm thinking you're talking about King John. Yeah, Adam is talking about the bastard that Chris Cotterman did in King John. And yep, that's actually a really funny character. Like, no matter how you do it, no matter what else is going on in King John, the bastard is really funny. And the commodity speech.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, Shakespeare has lots of wonderful language, lots of wonderful things that he's done for English in general. My first exposure to Shakespeare as a child, my mother had a book of the sonnets. And so instead of bedtime stories, she would read me bedtime sonnets. So I would go to sleep to the Iambic Pentameter, the heartbeat language. And that was really what sort of started it for me. I didn't always know what she was talking about. I was a kid. I didn't quite understand what was being said in the sonnets, but it was the rhythm of the language that really got to me. And then as I got older and I took dance classes, the rhythm is what has always sort of resonated with me the most, which is why it's so interesting that we'll be talking about Iambic Fundamentalism and what that means and what that looks and sounds like, because it's not always quite so easy. So with that in mind, I'm going to scooch on to my next bullet point, which is, what does it mean to be Iambic Fundamentalist at BSF? And so what I have to show you, I'm going to share my screen real fast. I have somewhere. I have too many tabs open. There it is. Okay. We have, at BSF, we have Speak the Speech, the Baltimore Shakespeare Factory Guide to Understanding and Speaking the Text. And this is something that, we have, disseminated to our actors at various points in various rehearsal processes, but this is sort of the foundation of what BSF's approach to language, text work, and iambic fundamentalism is. It's a long packet, I mean, relatively-ish speaking, 44 pages, but it goes into rhetoric and it goes into the different kinds of scansion. It goes into, just the details of what it means to do text work and the different tools that are within your text work toolbox. Because text work itself isn't just one machine. It's so many different tools that you can use however you see fit and however is suitable for the project at hand. So this is just a little section of the packet on your screen here. And when we look at the principles of iambic fundamentalism, what we're looking here is trying to stay as close as possible to how Shakespeare was presented, trying to stay as honest to how Shakespeare would have been heard when it was performed for the first time. We try to keep, the lights on, and we try to recreate what the Elizabethan stage would have been like as much as we can within Baltimore, Maryland. And we have done our best, but what is really the foundation of that isn't just the costumes and the gender swapping and the keeping the lights on, but it's the beauty of the language itself. And the reason that we ask our actors to go through this text work process and to go through, we've done text work workshops that are full weekends long to make sure that everybody's on the same page before we even embark on the rehearsal process, because Shakespeare can be very difficult for modern audiences. Some people are under the assumption that Shakespeare was writing in Old English, which is not true. He was writing in Middle English and the beginning of Modern English. So we've got this transition from the Old English of Beowulf and the Middle English of, more Chaucer stuff. He's taking that foundation and he's modernizing it and streamlining it into the beginnings of what we know English to be today. And he how many words did he invent over the course of his plays that have fundamentally changed the way we understand our language at this point? But that doesn't change the fact that for many people, being exposed to Shakespeare for the first time is daunting. It is challenging to understand what's being said all the time. That's one of the things that our residency programs do, is that we go into the schools and we teach children how to read Shakespeare, how to understand Shakespeare, because if they're not understanding what they're saying, then they're not going to be able to appreciate the language for what it is, and they're not going to be able to find that passion for Shakespeare that we all have. So what we do in our workshops and in our residencies is that we break it down into the fundamentals of what text work is. And it starts with the rhythm, the heartbeat of the language, the drum beat of how he's writing and how everything should be said. I made the joke earlier about two households, both alike in dignity. But that is at its foundation, the core of where we start. We have to be able to understand the rhythm of the language so that we understand the rules and when he breaks them and why. And I have an example of that we're going to work on together later on. But for the moment, we're just looking at, what scansion is and what iambic means and what iambic pentameter means. These are just the foundations of what the language is. And what we're looking at here is an iamb, which is a section of 2 syllables, one stressed and one unstressed. And when we're looking at iambic pentameter, all that means is that we're in the iambic rhythm. There are 5 iambs in a line for a total of 10 syllables. But wait, Abby, I hear you saying, there are so many times when Shakespeare doesn't do that, when we have an extra syllable, an extra 2 syllables, or we don't have enough syllables to fill the line. And that's what I mean about this is the foundation. We have to understand the rules before we can break them. And he does break the rules, sometimes for more reason than others. A lot of his earlier plays tend to be the most, rhythmically perfect or the most regular when he's writing in verse, and it's more towards the end, in the the middle end of his career, where we see him breaking those rules with a little more frequency and abandon. I think he enjoyed it, honestly. He established himself, and then he was like, now that everybody knows what to expect, we have to keep them guessing. So our example here for our basic iambic pentameter is, in sooth, I know not why I am so sad. Now, if everybody on stage was speaking that exaggeratedly for 2.5 hours, the audience would be put to sleep, which is why, while it is important to work on the text work, understand what we're saying, how we're saying it, it is also up to the actor and the director to find ways to soften it enough that we keep the rhythm without becoming so rigid and inflexible that we lose the beauty of the language. If everybody just went around with, in sooth, I know not why I am so sad, then we lose the lyricism that is so important to Shakespeare's language and the things that set his plays apart in many ways to the authors that are writing at the same time. So we soften it into the lyricism of, in sooth, I know not why I am so sad. We're still keeping the iambic, because that's what it means for us to be iambic fundamentalist. We're trying to keep the iambic pentameter as much as possible. We're trying to fit the lines into iambic pentameter as much as we can without becoming so rigid that it is, just little cookie cutters on stage. And our packet goes on to go into many different kinds. We've got trochaic, we've got anapestic, all of these other wonderful, high school and college level English words that aren't going to help with demystifying, which is the point of the discussion tonight, is demystifying. But I do want to touch on trochaic, because oftentimes when the rhythm changes, it is the iamb that is changing into a trochee. And the iamb is the heartbeat, the da-dum, da-dum, da-dum. When we invert that into the trochee, it becomes da-dum, da-dum, da-dum. So the example here is double, double, toil, and trouble. And because that is an excellent example to give from the Scottish play, because that line is given by the witches. From the very moment that they start speaking and invoking and casting their spells, we hear automatically that the language has changed. These people are different. They're doing something new, something unusual and irregular. And that starts just from what they are saying. That's how Shakespeare is able to use this language and use the rhythm to give the audiences a clue as to what is happening, what's going on, and who the people are on stage. Are there any questions about this first section right now? Yes, Miss Beth.
Hi, I just wanted to mention, I don't know, I mentioned this to Sean, but even in the movie Friends and Romans, they took special attention for one scene to talk to the actors that will be doing Julius Caesar in the movie about iambic pentameter. And although they make just a part of it, it brings it to people's awareness. And so I think it's important, that we forget it's not just about something that actors do, but we need to do it all of ourselves. Because even when we speak in our own now, we have a certain rhythm that we speak with our language.
Absolutely, you're absolutely right. And more often than not, when we stop thinking about it and just speak the way we're meant to, more often than not, it becomes iambic. Because the heartbeat is within us, and the heartbeat is the rhythm of our lives. So absolutely, that is an excellent point, Miss Beth. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
I would like to note that Beth used iambic pentameter. We have a certain rhythm when we speak.
Exactly. See? What happens is that humans love the heartbeat. Humans live within that rhythm because it is the rhythm in which we live. So more often than not, we default to iambic because it is the thing that keeps us alive, keeps us breathing, keeps us going. It is what we know and what is so regular and soothing for us. It's the first sound we hear within our mother's womb is the heartbeat, her heartbeat and our heartbeat. So finding all of that together and keeping that married in our language, I think, is one of the things that is so beautiful about doing text work, because it starts from the moment that we are born and it continues until we die. It is a regular thing that we always experience. Yes, Miss Beth.
which also makes it fun when you think of no matter what form of language we speak in any specific language, whether it be medieval, whether it be the very beginnings of a language, we're using this beat and this rhythm. We have different words, but if we were to have universal translators, we'd be able to follow the other person's, I'm sorry for the Doctor Who, Hitchhiker's Guide reference, but it's one of those things where because we do the same thing on and on and on, we have far more in common with the past language than we thought we did.
Exactly. Yes, yes, that is very true. And I think that's one of the things that has been wonderful for me as a teaching artist is to bring that to students. When they ask me questions and say, I don't get it. This Shakespeare guy is so hard. I don't understand what he's saying. I'm like, well, the thing that you just said to me right now was in iambic. What? No, it wasn't. Yes, it was. You know how to do this. It's written into who we are. It's just difficult because we're not used to this sort of language and the way he phrases sentences. And that is a challenge that a lot of our children face when they're introduced to Shakespeare for the first time. But being able to persevere through it is what matters. And being able to do text work like this is very important. I know that we have a couple of our teaching artists in the group, and I'm sure that they are looking forward to our residencies that are coming up and being able to bring this same sort of idea to the children, teaching them how to scan, teaching them the difference between prose, rhyme, blank verse, all those things that we're going to be talking about tonight. So we can move right on into prose, rhyme, and blank verse. And we've got, oh yes, we have this nice disclaimer. It is not accurate to say the lower classes speak prose and the upper classes speak verse. Prose and verse are just different ways of communication that serve different purposes. So when the rhythm changes, when we move from verse to prose, when we move from the iambic pentameter to just speaking without planned rhythm, there's a reason that the character has made that shift. There's a reason that we have transitioned from ba-bum, 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 ba-bum to just regular flat speaking. There's a reason that we've broken that. And just the same, there's a reason when we choose to go back. So that's one of the things that we look at a lot in the rehearsal space. Oh, well, I speak in prose here. Okay, why? What is it that you're saying? Who are you talking to? Oh, well, I started in prose and now suddenly I'm in verse. Okay, why? When did it happen? Can you identify the exact moment that you changed from prose into verse? What is that thought there? What is your character's thought process? What is your motivation? What is your action that you're doing? Because there's always a reason to make the change, a reason to make the shift. And there's usually a reason for rhyming. Rhyming doesn't just come out of nowhere. Sometimes people make accidental rhymes when we talk, but more often than not, when we're looking at a script, there's a reason that a character is choosing to rhyme. Our packet says that it's most often used for ritualistic or choral effects, for highly lyrical passages that give advice or point to a moral. I've also had a professor that said every time a character ends with a rhyming couplet, they're making a promise. And we're drawing attention to what that promise is. And rhyming is also interesting to look at because, like I said, how we listen for, we can hear the changes from iambic to trochaic if we make that shift. The audience will also have their attention caught by the rhyme. If there's a rhyming moment, the audience will hear, oh, that's something I need to listen to. That's something I need to pay attention to. That was important enough that it broke the blank verse to catch my attention. But we don't rhyme all the time because that would be unnatural. It would be strange to go around just rhyming at the end of every couplet. So it's the establishing of the rule, the breaking of the rules, and the returning to the rules of language that catches the attention, that keeps the interest of the audience, that keeps them engaged in what is being said and why it is being said. And so we have a lot of blank verse. Most of Shakespeare is written in blank verse. We have some examples here. But soft, what light through yonder window breaks, Romeo and Juliet. Now is the winter of our discontent. And this is one of the lines, the Richard III line, that underscores why we are Iambic fundamentalists. Because there are many actors that would choose to deliver that as Now is the winter of our discontent, drawing attention to the moment, now is. But if we keep it in iambic fundamental, if we keep it iambic, now is the winter of our discontent. It draws more attention to the full line as opposed to drawing attention to just the beginning. And these are also decisions that are made in the rehearsal room between actor and director. Actor can make choices, director can make choices, but establishing the iambic fundamentalism tells us that we want to keep in iambic as much as possible and only break it if there's a good enough reason. We can't just break it all willy-nilly, otherwise it won't mean anything. And we can't do it as easily for this Merchant of Venice line. The quality of mercy is not strained, because then it'd end up with the quality of mercy is not strained. That doesn't make much sense. I can understand more reasonably the argument for now is the winter of our discontent, because he comes out strong with this declaration. But for the most part, we want to stay in the iambic as much as possible. Now, this is our variation on the blank verse line. Like I said earlier, there are some times when lines are more than 10 syllables or less than 10 syllables. And that is true. And again, once we've established the regular, when we break it and make it irregular, there's a reason for it. So it has been called feminine endings. I prefer to use irregular endings for unnecessary gendered terms, but we've got to be or not to be. That is the question. If it was just going to be a iambic pentameter, to be or not to be, that is the question. But now we have it hanging. We have the question. There's too much thought going in. Hamlet is speaking so fast he can't fit it into the line, so he has to break it and finish his thought afterwards because there's so much going on. All of his turmoil is coming out through his mouth in this iconic soliloquy. Oftentimes you'll find that when someone has a line with an irregular ending, it's because they're thinking too fast. There's a lot going on there. There's a lot that they're trying to say, but they can't fit it into the regular pentameter, so it breaks. I recently played Cordelia in King Lear. Cordelia has a significant amount of irregular endings, especially at the beginning, because that first scene where where everything she's known is being torn away from her, there's a lot going on. There's a lot that she's trying to say. Father, please don't turn me away. Don't make this game into something that is going to cause more problems. Father, I love you. You know I do, but I can't do this in front of everybody. There's so much that she's got going on that it spills over. And when it spills over, oftentimes it helps carry you into the next line. A lot of the times you'll see in pentameter, you end a line on punctuation, a comma for a breath or a pause or a new thought, or a period to end the thought, exclamation or something. But with irregular endings, it usually flows into the next one. Oftentimes you'll find that the actor doesn't have time to breathe. To be or not to be, that is the question whether 'tis nobler in the mind. It carries us right into the next thought. So these are ways that we can use the rhythm and use the pacing of the line to tell us more about what's going on in the character's head and to tell the story clearly. That is also critical when we're working with text work. We have to be able to tell the audience what is happening. They have to be able to follow what is being said. Otherwise, we're not doing our job as performers. If they can't follow the story, if they can't follow the characters' words or thought processes, then they're missing key parts of what makes these plays so beautiful and so iconic. We talked about trochees already, the ways to start lines, playing on pipes of corn and versing love, as opposed to playing on pipes of corn. That's not how the word is said. That's not natural. Playing on pipes of corn. All of these are just tools to help us understand better what is being said and how. And within this packet, we have 44 pages of things that we could talk about, and I'd keep you here for 4 hours as opposed to 1 hour, and nobody wants to be here that long. But this packet is full of information about ways to look at this, ways to read the lines, ways to scan the lines. And the emphasis that we put onto text work, why we do it, all of these tools that we give to the actors to make it clear. these are the things that you need to be doing so that you know what's happening. If you don't know what's being said, the audience doesn't know what's being said. So with this in mind, I'm going to stop sharing for a second. I'm going to open it up to another discussion, to another question. And I'm going to say, what do we think the value is for Iambic fundamentalism versus systems that aren't text work focused or text work heavy? Why bother doing Iambic fundamentalism, or why bother doing all of this text work if it's so easy to just ba-bum, 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 ba-bum? What's the point of forcing the actors to do all of that? What are your thoughts on it?
I have strong opinions on this, but I'm going to let our guests pop in if they have experiences with this. Otherwise, I'm going to say it's a tool to use to get more information out of the words. It's just because you could do it without it. You could just go ahead and do the lines and say what you think it means. But if you have these tools for getting the rhythm or the lack of rhythm, then you can get a little bit more into the character's headspace. And it really, I've always found it helps. And it can be a little overwhelming when you're starting. I can totally
when you've opened up that email, a week before your text
and
workshop,
look
and you see
yeah.
44 pages and
You're
all
looking
of
at it
these
going,
things.
I'm reading the word epic Shazura, and I'm still not getting it. It's like,
Yes, you'll notice I skipped over that part.
Yeah. But you can grow into it and learn more as you're doing it. And I think the more that you learn about how to use it, the more you'll go, oh, here's another tool I can use to apply to the text. And these are the Iambic Pentameter and the trochees are it's just one tool, because I know there's more.
One of many.
Yeah, and I will go ahead and say that one of the embarrassing story about me trying to do, I'm like forcing Iambic Pentameter on this part of this script, and all of a sudden my director just says, yeah, that part's not in Iambic Pentameter. I'm like, oh, thank God. It's like, you can be wrong, but that's a hint. If it's not actually working, maybe you need to be looking at the text as unrhymed prose. And Adam has a little comment.
Yes, Adam says the text work ensures actors understand what they are saying. It gives them an opportunity to develop ideas for their characters supported by their understanding of the text. Yes, I love that second point. That is absolutely critically important. It gives the actors opportunities to make their choices and to, take their own interpretations of what the character is doing based off of how they understand what is being said. And if they can't put that work in, or if they struggle with that work, they'll struggle on their feet as well, because they won't have that initial connection to what is being said. It's harder to get it on your feet, get it in your body, get it moving if you're still there like, I'm still not exactly sure. So that is an excellent point, Adam. Thank you. Thank you for that. And there are plenty of Shakespeare companies that aren't Iambic fundamentalists and that don't take the time to do the text work together as a group. They'll just say, here's your script, do whatever text work you want. We'll see you for first rehearsal. Now, what BSF does is we try to have a text workshop weekend where all together we get in the room. And there's some work that you have to do to bring in, but we're still exploring together. What does this line mean? That's how you understood that line. This is what I wrote down. What do you have? And together we work on establishing our basis and our foundation together, so that together we grow as an ensemble, as a cast, as opposed to just coming in and and figuring out a week into rehearsal that, oh, that's what you think that's what you think I'm saying. No, this is what I think I'm saying, and now the whole scene has to be changed. But of course, clearly it works, because some of those theaters are very highly recommended, very highly awarded. So this is the conversation prompt. What is the value? How do we value the one over the other? What do we think?
And I think also text work goes hand in hand with dramaturgy. And the more that you have from the text, the more you can look at the history and the other resources and go, oh, this is what was meant. And you can make the decision to do something else, but you've got some answers in your toolbox to say, yes, but I decided to go a different way.
Yes. Yes, that's excellent. Because you have the toolbox, you can use your toolbox however you want it to be used. And you can also decide that, this one doesn't really work for today. So I'm just going to pop it back in there. I'm going to bring out the pliers again because I like the pliers. I don't know.
Okay. All right, I'm good.
Yes, Adam, that's also a point. Big budgets.
Oh.
They have big budgets.
I just had a comment as an audience member. Of course, it's going by way too fast for me to kind of pick up on all this depth. So for me, it's just a feeling that I get, right? I can remember that Cordelia seemed uncomfortable and surprised, and part of that was the rhythm, but I wouldn't have been able to tell you that in the moment, right? It's kind of going by on multiple levels. Is what I mean.
Oh yeah.
That's a great perspective to have. Thank you for sharing. Because as an actor and as a director, I look at, when I approach these sorts of topics, I look at them from, one side of the table or one side of the theater. But it's also important for people, for actors to do the work, and also sometimes for the audience to understand, the work that has gone in, so that we can understand how the language sits, how it's being heard, how it's being received by the people that are there to see the story. And at the end of the day, the text work supports the storytelling that we are doing. We bring our toolbox out to make sure that we tell the story in a way that it can be heard and understood. Because that's what many people said. One of the things that got them involved in Shakespeare were the stories. The stories of, young love or family drama, the original, Desperate Housewives. And if we're not telling the story in a way that is understandable, then we are failing the language, and we are failing to do what we've set out to do as performers. If it's not being understood, then it's not going to survive, because it won't have that same impact on people if they don't know what's happening. Yes, Miss Beth.
I was going to say, and also with using the way he wrote, it makes the audience want to pay more attention, because if he was speaking like we would hear it at home, yeah, okay, go ahead, I'm just going to go in the other room. But he's sort of grabbing us and just pulling us gently away from what we think should be the normal language for a conflict or for a good point, and just making, oh, let me watch that a little bit more, kind of thing.
Definitely. I mean, that's one of the nice things about having the language go from this rhyming iambic pentameter couplet, that you can go, okay, this is pretty, and I'm getting into the rhythm of it. And then somebody breaks that rhythm and you go, what? Wait, what happened? Like, what now? What now? Like wait, it's like time to wake up, pay attention to this now, because something's happening. Here we go.
Exactly. The rules are broken for a reason, to get attention or to underscore something. Yeah. And Adam's put in the chat, I believe it is the actor's job to understand the language and translate that into an emotion for the audience. I think that's a beautiful way of putting it. Because yes, we've all seen, soap operas with, the bad acting where it's just, what? I can't believe you've done this thing. How could this have happened? That's the last thing that we want, because we want to use the language to underscore the story and the emotional landscape that we're creating, so that when Lear throws Cordelia out of his life, out of his sight, out of his love, we feel that in our chest because of how the language is hitting her. He's spitting those words at her. She's reacting to them every time. And that is reflected in how he talks to her and how she is on her knees begging, Father, please don't.
Yeah.
And if we're not doing our job to show the emotion, then It goes back to the storytelling. Goes back to the storytelling. That is at its core what Shakespeare is doing, is telling stories. And when they're interpreted, that is at its core what we are doing. And so if we're not able to engage in the story, if we're not able to engage people in that story, then we're not doing our jobs. The audience isn't enjoying it, and they're not willing to come back. Because if we've got, Gertrude going, "Oh, Hamlet, thou hast thy father much offended." Well, then that's not nearly as exciting as Hamlet, thou hast thy father much offended. The stakes are higher. It gets our interest. It gets our attention. All of that fun stuff that keeps bringing us back.
So that's why we do the text work.
And now I have a little example for us to work on together. So I'm going to share my screen again. I've pulled a monologue from Love's Labour's Lost. And this, we're starting off strong because these two lines here, are you gonna do the thing? There we go. These two lines here immediately break our, stop it, thank you, immediately break our regular iambic pentameter. For this first line here, and I forsooth in love, how many syllables is that? Just hold out, you can just hold out your fingers up if you want.
I got 6.
I got 6 too. That does not a full pentameter make. And the next one, I that have been love's wit. I that have been love's wit. We got another 6. So as we look at it from an iambic fundamentalist perspective, how do we make those lines fit into iambic pentameter? It's not so easy as just combining them, right? Because if we just pop this here, and I forsooth in love, I that have been love's whip, well, now we have 12 syllables. And we could try to alight something. We could try to squeeze something together to, make it into 10 syllables. Does anybody see anything that could be alighted? To like squeeze, to shorten it any?
Yeah, but I don't want to.
Well, what did you see? What did you see, Sean?
Yeah, that of, or have been, or yeah, forsooth really doesn't squinch, it
Squinch.
nothing that really wants to squinch together, or you want to like remove things. It's just not there. Otherwise, it's one of those 12 syllable lines, but
Right. It does not easily fit into our iambic pentameter. So when we look at it, what choices can an actor make?
Abigail, is it written as 2 lines? Is that the original text?
I'm not quite sure if it is. I pulled this from one of those like Shakespeare Online websites, and I don't know how he has originally written it. That is an excellent question, and that would be a good thing for someone to look at. Yeah.
The reason I'm asking is, and this may be getting ahead of ourselves, but is it possible that the blank feet could be silence?
Well, that is one of the things
Okay.
that I was going to bring up. So go ahead. How would you present it if we are going to have our silences?
To either put a pause at the end of the line or at the beginning of the line. So you'd say, "And I forsooth in love, I that have been love's whip." So you're taking a moment or two. You're taking those empty feet to just take a breath and a pause, and it's just an indication that possibly there's a little bit of space between the two thoughts.
Absolutely, yes. I think that is definitely one way that we could do it. And
In this case,
go ahead.
In this case, it doesn't even have to be at ends of lines because he is pissed about being in love. Every little chunk could have its own little breath as he is processing that he, forsooth, in love. All of these are individual shocking moments that are just pounding on him.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that is also excellent. That's a good way to do it. And I, forsooth,
Mm-hmm.
in love. You can put the feet in there.
Mm-hmm.
You can also put it at the end, but then we've also
Mm-hmm.
got this one, I that have been love's whip. we're starting with a trochee there. So we could also put the space at the beginning of that line, you know, and I forsooth in love, space, 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 I that have been love's whip. So we still have the unstressed.
The version of it that I was working from when I directed it actually had those two on a single line. So it was an overpacked line rather than two short ones. So
And that's the other
I was being
example.
driven by it starting there when I took my actor through it.
Yeah. And that was the other sort of easy, you know, I saw two easy answers to the question, which was the space that Stephen mentioned, and then also putting it together, you know, with like the rapid thought process. And I forsooth in love, I that have been love's whip, you know, just sort of jamming those thoughts together as he's processing, oh my God, I'm in love and it's terrible. So processing all of those thoughts. But that's where we look into, you know, how would we look at that in a fundamentalist way? There's no easy answer there. And it all depends on how we're telling it. How we're, you know, the choices that we are making for this character in this moment, knowing what we do about where he is and, you know, who he is. And I can't put the whole, it's a long monologue. I can't put the whole monologue on the screen without it being itty bitty. So we're just gonna keep looking at it together. Feel free to read it to yourself, looking at, you know, what can we tell about this person and where he is based off of what he is saying. What he's saying and how he is saying it.
The rhetoric in this speech is awesome.
Yes. Yes, this is a very rhetoric heavy speech.
You could do a whole session on rhetoric probably too, but
yeah, well, we'd be here for another hour. But rhetoric is also excellent. Sean, do you want to talk a little bit about rhetoric?
Rhetoric
Just like,
is fun, but it is expansive. And there's all kinds of Latin names for all the different things, but I will go ahead and say my favorite type of rhetoric, and you see a lot of it here, is the lists or the triplets. Or it's like tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow, or list, list, list. And in this one, you've got that one line, this wimpled, whining, purblind, wayward boy, which is one list. And then another list line, and like he keeps on doing these lists in this speech, comparing himself to these other things that he either degrades or he is learning he's becoming.
Well, I would say we've got an extra long list here.
Yeah.
This whole section from this wimpled all the way to oh my little heart is one sentence of just lists. Yeah. The repetition of this wimpled, whining, purblind, wayward boy, the senior, junior, giant dwarf, Dan Cupid, regent of love rhymes, lord of folded arms, the anointed sovereign of sighs and groans, liege of all loiterers and malcontents, dread prince of plackets, king of codpieces, sole imperator and great general of trotting parators. Oh, my heart. So we've rushed through this. We've gotten all of the lists in. Exactly.
Right before oh my little heart, where he's like,
yes. Because he's just listed his way through, was this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and a half lines of just one thing after another. So finally just, oh, my heart. No wonder we've got the O there. He needs to breathe.
Yeah. Well, he's just gone through like the little clickety clack of this roller coaster he's about to go on. And that O is him just reaching the crest and going, ah.
Exactly.
This is why the rest of this is so long too.
Mm-hmm.
Abigail, can I break in for a second?
Absolutely.
I actually, with my former partner, did a lot of work on rhetoric with Maryland Shakespeare Festival, and what we found is that while there are thousands of rhetorical structures, they kind of break down into 5 essential categories, which are balance, omission, repetition, and expansion. And like this, for example, is a figure of expansion, which generally is a feeling of dissatisfaction in the actor. They're looking, or the character, they're looking for the next, they're trying to find what the next feeling is, and they're just reaching and reaching and reaching. So it's those, you know, and sometimes the figures are combinations. Sometimes it'll be an expansion and balance, or it may be, you know, omission's a little tough to find because it's tough to find something that isn't there. But each of those types of figures has a different purpose in the speech. Omission usually we found is spoken by villains or people who have some sort of agenda, because what they're trying to do is, by leaving out words, they're trying to draw you into the confidence of, I don't need to say everything to you. It's really, in Richard III's opening speech, it's very prevalent. He starts dropping out all of the helping verbs, like, I don't need to say everything to you. We get this. So it creates this sense of camaraderie.
Absolutely.
But that's just an example. But it was just fascinating that we were able to take a good portion of all of those figures and break them down into just those 5 categories.
Yes, and in the BSF textbook packet, we go into those categories as well. I didn't want to scroll down to them, because if we started there, then we wouldn't end before 10 o'clock. But that is an excellent point, to take those categories. And, you know, rhetoric is an old art, an old, you know, way of constructing your thought. You know, we see it, especially, funnily enough, we see it a lot in, you know, the Roman plays, because it was so prevalent in the Roman Senate. You know, we've got these people that are learning not just what to say, but how to say it to get people on your side, like you were talking about. Richard is exactly going, I don't need to say these words, because, you know, we're on the same page now. You're on my side. You're on my side now, because you understand what I'm saying. Clearly you're with me. So rhetoric is another way to interact with the audience, absolutely. And being able to acknowledge that and find those rhetorical devices within speeches is absolutely important. We could have a whole nother bar to the bone about rhetoric. I'm going to pass that off to somebody else, though, so somebody else gets to lead that one.
I was gonna say, well, could we?
I mean, take that up with Sean. We
I'll
probably
put it on
could.
the list, and I'll
We'll
find
put it on
somebody
the
that
list.
loves it more than I do. But the other thing about this one, just to go back to Iambic Pentameter, is, okay, sure, he has these 2 6-syllable lines to start up, but that's him starting the engine and getting his feet. And then the rest of them, you know, he's got this list, he's got this ticking time bomb of feelings going on. And it's both disturbing to him, but it's also settling him into this rhythm and getting him where he needs to go with this thought process.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah, he's trying to get himself, he's trying to like understand it himself and explain it to himself, you know, and he's asking himself a lot of questions, you know, am I to be a corporal of his field and wear his colors like a tumbler's hoop? What? I sue, I seek a wife? It's written here as an exclamation point, but I think in many ways, you know, it's up to the actor to decide if he's asking that question. But we've got a lot of this, you know, what is happening? Let me explain it to myself. I'm not sure how I feel about that. Let's talk about it again. And you see that a lot with these, you know, long soliloquies of asking the question, answering the question, finding a new question and answering it again. And a lot of that makes the actor's work so much easier, because there it is. There's the question right there that I'm trying to answer. But this is a very nice speech, because we've got, you know, we start in such a starting the engines, you're right, Sean, this, you know, sort of disjointed beginning up at the top. You know, and I forsooth in love. I that have been love's whip, a very beetle to a humorous sigh, a critic, nay, a night watch constable, a domineering pedant are the boy, than whom no mortals so magnificent. You know, there's no way. There's no way. I'm not,
and
you know.
this very even way that he ends it. Oh, wait, there we go. Yeah, ending with the rhyming couplet.
Yep.
You gotta love it. Resolved.
It is
So
it is very
love, if I
satisfying.
pursue grown, some must love my lady and some Joan. whoever Joan is.
It is very satisfying. And he's making his promise. Well, I will love. I will. I will love, write, sigh, pray, sue, groan. He's making his promise with his rhyme there. And it is after all of the rhetoric and all of the expansion and all of the lists and the go to, it is a plague, whatever. We're still ending in a very nice way that wraps it up for the audience to be like, oh, okay, he is in love. We're not really leaving anything up in the air. We're still sitting there like, okay, all right, we get it. We see where you are. Thank you for explaining it for us.
Thank you
That
for
takes us
taking us
into the
on this
next
journey
thing.
with you.
Precisely.
Thank you
Monologues
for
and
making me a part
soliloquies
of
are
this.
excellent journeys to share with the audience. Yes. Yes, yes.
So, yes, Beth.
I just have one question. Reading through this, it's beautiful, but maybe I missed it earlier or something because I had to chase Swithin around. It mentions Dan Cupid instead of Damn Cupid, or did they give Cupid a first name?
I mean, of all the first names to give Cupid, I don't really imagine Dan as being the most, Greek. It could be, a mistyping.
Yeah,
You
I
know,
was thinking, yeah, because there are many different words, but Dan Cupid just doesn't sound.
right.
He
And that's
names
one of the great
Cupid
things that you
Dan.
can.
He names Cupid Dan and he names other women Joan. It's who maybe.
Well,
So then we look at it as, is this a character choice or is this a translation error or a transcription
is
error?
a transcription, because if Jean and Joan are basically the same, but they're spelled different in English than in French, maybe it's another word that was supposed to, because I'm going, that sounds like somebody got a TARDIS, went back in time and helped him write something.
There was a whole episode about that.
Oh yes, and we
Yes, there
seen,
was.
we went and saw the witches in,
Or
in
We
that
sure did.
episode.
Or it could be a biblical reference to Daniel. It could be named after some modern politician. Who knows?
Right.
I love the way that they're using this. Right now I'm reading Burleigh. It's a biography of William Cecil. And when you realize how bright he was and how he was watching everything, and I'm sure that Shakespeare and all the other writers were going, how can I make a message without having William Cecil, either senior or junior, William or Robert Cecil, or even have Walsingham come after me looking for something in what I wrote as a spy message to somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes, very true. And I'm looking right now at this line. Nope, this one. Here we go. Which presents an interesting way of trying to scan it. Because I mentioned a lighting earlier where we, sort of smush things to try and make them fit. We can also expand things to try and make them fit. So if I was just going to read this without thinking about text work, I would say, the anointed sovereign of sighs and groans, which doesn't quite sound like Iambic Pentameter there, does it? So we've also got to fit this in there if we're going to be fundamental about it. So the easiest way I see is to expand sovereign, the anointed sovereign of sighs and groans. We still got this, the anointed.
I do have one quick question.
Absolutely.
When they were presenting this on stage, how was their Iambic Pentameter speech process affected by their regional accents? Because regional accents are forever. I mean, it's not
Yes.
something we just invented.
That is very true. That is very true. And that's one of the things that the Crystal duo,
Ben and David Crystal.
Yes, the Crystal duo has been working on to attempt to recreate what we call original pronunciation, the dialect that we think Shakespeare was originally presented. Because you're right, there were regional dialects, but there was also sort of like how when you watch the news now, and you can go to any any state anywhere in the country, all of the news anchors have sort of like the same flat sort of journalist accent. We think that the original pronunciation is the closest thing that we've got to how the actors would have presented it. And there might be some room for fluctuation if someone came down from Scotland or what have you. But when we talk about original pronunciation, it is our best reconstruction of how we understand the language would have been presented during Shakespeare's time, with what we know of how language has changed, and how linguistic anthropologists have worked on recreating, restructuring from how things were spelled, and the things that he tries to rhyme here and there. That I'm trying to remember a good example off the top of my head.
Love and prove.
Like, yes, like love and prove, that don't rhyme for the way we speak now, but in original pronunciation they do rhyme. So
Right.
looking for those examples and finding where well, this is obviously supposed to rhyme, but how could it have been said that would have made it rhyme? So they've done a lot of beautiful work, and that's one of the things that we are very proud of as a company, is that we are the leading company in America and in the world for doing original original pronunciation work. Yeah.
Okay.
And it is interesting as an audience member, because you do have to tune your ear, but then you don't have one actor doing a Brooklyn accent and one doing a Baltimore accent and one doing a received pronunciation accent. It's all the same pronunciation and the same rhythm. So all of the actors are on the same page. So once you tune to that, it actually became a lot easier for me as an audience
More consistent. Yeah.
Just level out that playing field just a little bit for the audience. And it was actually kind of wonderful. And that is part of what they had, is because London 1600s was really cosmopolitan. You had everybody coming from everywhere. So when you had somebody on stage, there was, in a way, this original pronunciation theater way of speaking that just leveled the playing field for everybody, and didn't, for everybody from groundlings to the upper concourses. That was, everybody was able to know what was going on. It was kind of cool. Or I think it was kind of cool. I wasn't there.
I agree. I think it was kind of cool. I wasn't there, but I feel pretty confident saying it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool.
You may have been in a past life. You don't know.
That's entirely possible.
Explains so
Entirely
much.
possible.
Yeah, we're recycled until we get it right. So who knows how many times we've been someplace that we don't remember.
Very true. Very
So
true.
anyway, but anyway, thank you, Abigail. And hopefully this helps demystify a little bit about what we do with BSF and how we're approaching text, and give you a little hint about what goes on and why we're what's the use of doing text work. Well, here's why. So any final thoughts, Abigail?
No, thank you for inviting me to do this presentation, and thank you all for attending. This has been a great conversation, and I'm always happy to talk about things that I'm very passionate about.
Okay.
Oh,
Yes,
I
Beth?
just wanted to mention, I mentioned it already to you, Shannon, but please, everybody, if you get a chance to see the universality of Shakespeare across the board, please watch Friends and Romans, about the side actors who decide to do a Shakespeare play, Julius Caesar, to show their true acting skills in an independent film. It's a delightful comedy, and you just truly fall in love with it, and it makes you think.
It's on my list.
That sounds like so much fun. Thank you for recommending it.
It's worth it. I taped it so I could watch it more than once or twice.
Awesome. Okay, well, thank you, everybody, and I'm going to let everybody get to their dinners or whatnots. So thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Aloha.